Hello. So yeah, thank you for joining. Like I said, we are talking about organizational management today as part of the transition process. I was wrong. This is not the last transition call that we're having, like I said before. So today we're talking about organizational management, what that means, what it means to like manage the organization from a procedural standpoint, from a process standpoint. So you can see the full screen of the PowerPoint, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So the main point of today is just the idea of passing the torch. So this is really useful for you as as the successor, and your predecessor should also look through this when they have time, just because it's really important to understand the three main things that should be transferred properly or effectively. And so financial files, your bank management, and financial policies in general. And so the first thing is financial files. There's a lot of words on the page, but I will explain everything. So in essence, financial files should be transferred. And what that means is all of your documents, whether they're physical or virtual, that are pertaining to relationships with the university, bookkeeping, transactional management, etc. So basically anything that is important to the transfer of knowledge from you as the successor from your predecessor, or vice versa. And so the main things that should be transferred in terms of access or understanding is the management tools. So this is for the tracking of your members, of finances, and so that includes budget tools, which encompasses income statements, and then you've got your budgeted versus actuals. So when you look at the budget tool for this year, you should be able to discern and sort of digest the data that exists so that you can use it leading up to WNC, leading up to next year, to make a budget that actually makes sense based on historical data and understanding what what successes and what improvements can be made from the prior year. And so then all payment trackers and tracking tools, so any EP payment tracking, any invoice collection tracking, so that's for the OGX side and the ICX side. So making sure that all of your accounts receivable are that are outstanding are to your knowledge. So like your predecessor basically notifies you of all of the accounts receivable that are outstanding, so that you can follow up with companies on that. And then if EPs haven't paid, you also can follow up with your OGX team, make sure that all of the payments are made before the year starts or as soon as possible, so that you don't start the year with uncollected revenue and uncollected incomes that could affect how you make financial decisions. And so then the next thing is financial reports, basically showing the LC's finances for the year. So this is in the form of a budget tool, whether it's a wave accounting statement. It's important to have all of these things, and whether you use them or not is another thing, but basically as long as you have all of this information, then you can't say that you didn't understand the prior year. So the financial files are really important in terms of organizational management, because the organization can't continue if there's a consistent gap between knowledge from the predecessor to the successor. And so financial files are really important, and this leads to bank management. So it's important to understand and review all the financial statements from your entire team, or from the entire term, I'm sorry. And so your team should understand all these things as well. So your predecessor should be transferring this knowledge to you so that you can transfer it to your team, and your team can transfer it to all new members, and the cycle basically continues. And so you want to ensure all the files from the previous steps are transferred and reviewed with your successor. So basically, all the financial files should help understand how to manage your bank account, whether that's the MC controlled one or the LC controlled one. And so that leads to local bank accounts. So if you have any local bank accounts, you shouldn't have more than one, but if you have any local bank accounts, ensure that the cash amount totals to less than $2,000 and does not have ISIC in the name. This is important just because your local bank account should not have more than that amount, otherwise it has to be registered. You have to file taxes and all these things. And so the transition amount should be less than that 2,000. If you have more than 2,000, as per compendium, the excess of that $2,000 has to be sent to the MC managed LC accounts. And so it's really important that the next DPF, so that's you, and the LCP elect, which would be Tariq in your case, would work with Alessandra and Samira to basically focus on transferring that money over to an LC managed account that you guys are both controlling. That way the transition is successful, it's smooth, and you have all of your money that you can track, and you guys are able to use it rather than having to worry about reaching out to them in the future. So trying to do this before your terms even start is really important, and it'll go a long way in terms of being prepared with the money that you have.
Okay.
Do you have any questions thus far?
No.
Okay. Yeah, because like local bank accounts has always been a very interesting subject, and it's always been something that people.
Yeah, I guess I do have one. So
Yeah.
are we allowed to have a local bank account?
So you can have a local bank account. The terms of opening it is you just can't have ISIC in the name. So for example, my LC has used a personal bank account that has it's basically a joint bank account between the LCP and myself. And so we have to just monitor that account, make sure we're not basically putting more than $2,000 into that bank account. And the spending also has to be monitored to make sure that all spending decisions are sort of bureaucratic process where the LCP has to approve it, I have to approve it, and it has to be basically in the interest of like what I think in Austin is doing, for example. So it can't just be like a social expense or something like that. It has to be monitored. And so yes, you can, short answer, you can have a local bank account. It's just that you should look at the compendium, which has a few guidelines of how to open one and like what the best case practices are for that. And the main thing is not having ISIC in the name and not being above $2,000, but you can open one for sure.
And then we would have to, like, at the end of the, I don't know, semester or 6 months, we would have to give a report, a budget report to the MC on this.
Yeah, so every quarter, basically you're gonna send like a quarter one report, a quarter two report, semester report, quarter three, quarter four, and then your whole year report. Each quarter you're going to be asked the question, do you guys have a local bank account? You should not lie about that. Basically, if you have a local bank account, you just have to pull the income statements or like the bank statements from whatever online banking you guys use. So, for example, if you use Chase Bank, they have online banking where you can just go. It's like a simple one-click, and you say, I want all of the statements from January 1st to March 31st. So that would be like the first quarter. And then all you're doing is attaching that to the Sonar report or the quarter one report so that the MC has records of like what you guys have been spending money on, how much money you have, so that it doesn't get out of hand and it doesn't become a liability in the future.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, if you have any questions, like at any time, we're almost like 2/3 done actually with this. This is a pretty short session, yeah. But most of it was just discussion based. Since you're here, I can answer any questions, of course. But yeah, just stop me if I'm talking too fast or.
We talk at a similar pace.
Oh yeah, no, I speak very quickly sometimes, but yes. So we have two parts to the financial policies. So the current financial policies, this is pertaining mostly to your predecessors, so like the current VPFs. So it's important to review all of the current policies, and this is something that should be happening, like a discussion that should be happening between you and Alessandra about basically reviewing the current policies that are in place for budget timelines. So when you're budgeting for something, what is the timeline? Like there should be a timeline that's associated with the project, or what is like the timeline for your budget in general. Like in January, we're going to spend this much on ICX operations or OGX operations or whatever it is. So just reviewing those policies, like what the sort of mandate is for that, and then looking at reimbursement timeframes. So for a rule that I have, for example, is within 14 days of the purchase, it should be in my hands or my team's hands, so that within 30 days of the purchase, we have it already on Podio for reimbursement, or we've basically settled the amount through a local bank account if it needs to be like a speedy purchase. And so the
recommend a local bank account.
What's up?
You do recommend a local bank account?
It is really situational. I don't not recommend it, but I also like you have to like there's a lot more responsibility associated with having one, just because you're going to have to monitor it. And so I would say if you guys plan to like have things that you're going to have to spend a lot of money on, or if you have things that you wouldn't normally be able to like pay for upfront and then reimburse, having a local bank account is like for emergencies or for like those spending decisions that exceed how much anybody in the LC could like front or pay for. And so I personally do recommend it like for the like for Austin's reality. We do have like a lot of situations in which we make high cost purchases. And so we have the local bank account as a way of being able to pay for that and then reimbursing it in the long run, like so that there's not a problem of somebody having to spend like $500 of their own cash or something like that. And so I can't speak to Miami's reality, but like for Austin's reality, having a local bank account has helped us in many occasions. We didn't have one actually for this entire school year, or actually even for this entire fiscal year. But when I was VP last year, we had one for the 3 months that I was VP, and it was really, really helpful in like emergency situations. So,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I like.
For example, what? Well, give me an example of an emergency.
Yeah. So like when I say emergency, I mean so we had our end of the year gala, for example, for like our awards banquet. We had like an end of the year dinner with all of the LC. We had like our BUA come. We had alumni come, and so that ended up being through the university. And so the university sent us an invoice, which was under the $500 required for a direct payment. For the MC to pay for something directly, it has to be above $500. And so the amount came up to around $420, $430 for the gala, for the food, for the venue, for everything like that. And so that was not necessarily like when I say emergency, I say that pretty loosely. It was an expense that like we don't have members that could pay $430 up front, like to cover that, and then we'd reimburse them. So we have the local funds on hand to like basically we have a debit card. We work with the university and we give them like our information. They withdraw $430, and then we are able to like reimburse that through membership dues or whatever it is. So yeah, that's an example that like happened literally just a week ago. Was we had our end of the year gala. It was $430. Nobody could pay for it. So we have our local bank account that basically was like the reserves that we were able to take out. It's sort of like a savings account, like where you're keeping it in case of like absolute emergency where like something happens and you guys have to pay something really quickly.
Okay.
Yeah. So policies, we're talking about reimbursement timeframes. So like within 30 days is like the requirement in order for a reimbursement to even be valid. So within 14 days, I have my members get the receipts and be able to file them on Podio. And so then policies for expenses. So like what kind of expenses are you approving to reimburse? What kind of things are you not approving that need to come out of like personal pockets, whatever it is. And so like setting up what like spending patterns that you don't have to explicitly approve, but the LCP should always be approving every spending decision, because at the end of the day, it is their LC and it's like their final say. So basically setting up protocols for like what expenses, like expense decisions will look like, and then what your tracking procedures are, whether that's using wave accounting for like budget versus actuals, or like using your budget tool where you've got like an actuals tab and a budgeted tab so that you can compare the two, making sure that you're like in line with, you can use the same method for all of the year so that you're not like spreading all your data in multiple places. And so making sure your tracking procedures are sound and like are easy to follow. And then financial management hierarchy. So what I mean by that is, like I said, like the LCP and the VP Finance are making like approval and denial decisions for financial, like anything that's financial related or like resource allocation related. And so what is the hierarchy in the case that like the LCP approves something, you don't approve it, like how you work with your team to see if it's like something that is going to be approved. What is the process for like managing your finances so that you're not the only one and your LCP is not the only one that's like in charge of it. So making it more of like an open process so that the LC understands and like increasing transparency basically. If those practices are not in place, like trying to see what you can do to make them like a normal thing and like put them in place. And so just basically reviewing the current financial policies is really important, and it's like a discussion that you should definitely have with your predecessor. Yeah, and so then that's all for current financial policies.
Wait, what do you have?
I'm sorry?
What kind of financial management hierarchy do you have?
Yeah, so my LCP and I are the two final say for all financial decisions, but basically anything that isn't explicitly in the budget, like so strategic funds are more, there's more leeway in terms of like approving those decisions. So basically an opportunity creating investment is not something that will be explicitly on the budget because it's not something we've tried in the past. And so an example is like we have a networking event that our IGT team hosts every single semester. And so they need money for that. But we stopped doing that altogether, so we scrapped it. But they found a new like avenue to basically host a networking event. And so that was another opportunity creating investment where the LCP approved it, I approved it, but in order for us to like go forth with it, we had to make sure the IGT team had like, here are like here's what's going to be delivered at this networking event. Here is the return on investment. So basically, people had to pitch to us what was going on, and then my team had to unanimously agree with my decision of approving it, and then the LCP would be requested to approve it as well. So just making sure the entire finance team is on board and understands all the financial decisions that are happening. And so not every team is like as small as mine, so unanimous decision might not always work. But for me, like the hierarchy is that my team and I have equal say. I'm sorry?
Are you talking about eBoard collectively or your team?
My finance team. So the eBoard would approve decisions. So making sure that anything that is financially allocated to them, if that is being touched, and also like say the IGT team needs more money than they were allocated for the year, then wherever the funds are coming from, that ED members, that VP has to approve it as well. That's never happened in Austin just because our budget is pretty large and like pretty lenient in terms of strategic funds and things like that. But if you have a tight budget and another team is requesting funds that would exceed how much they're allocated, then the entire ED has to be notified of it and they all have to approve it. But basically a majority has to say, yeah, like that would be a good decision because it would help the LC in the long run. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. So then, etc. is basically any other policies that your predecessor can think of that are important to your local reality is really important because I'm naming a bunch of things with like examples from Austin that might not translate well to Miami, for example. So just making sure that all the current policies are discussed and are hit so that you have a good idea of what they are leading into your term, because your predecessor might not be around for when your term starts. So like making sure all of the knowledge that needs to be for now before it's too late. And so that leads into basically new financial policies, which is basically discuss the current policies with your successor to determine what changes or improvements would be best to develop these policies for the LC. And so what that means is it's a two-way process. So basically you as the successor should review the financial policies that are presented to you and that you know about. In your case, you were on the finance team before, right?
What?
You were on the finance team before. Like you're,
Yeah.
yeah. So like you should have a good understanding of what the financial policies are like as a member, and then any VP policies that you are like that come to light, you should also review those and say, okay, I think it could improve if we have members have more of a say on this, or like if members don't necessarily need to approve something, then just making the process as simple as possible so that decisions aren't like ambiguous in terms of whether they're like approved properly or not. So just basically discussing the current policies with your successor, determine what changes or improvements would be best, and implementing them for your LC so that you're not, you've got like a pretty solid structure of how you make financial decisions and what policies we have in place and like what procedures and stuff like that. But yes, this is basically the session in a nutshell. Organizational management boils down to these three things, where you've got financial policies, you have bank management, which is actually a pretty large like part of how you operate, because without money in your bank, you can't really make decisions because you don't have money to spend. And then it's a really simple process that like is often overlooked, but basically managing your bank and making sure that you have money in your bank, as well as making sure you keep track of and like have a tracking method for your financials at all times, whether that's your locally controlled bank account, your MC controlled bank account, or like finances in general. So like accounts receivable, things like that. And then the final thing is, of course, your financial files, making sure that all of these things are transferred, you have access to them, you are either the owner of them at this point, or like you're given rights to basically alter things. And like it's sort of like handing you a guidebook of what your AP term should look like with the knowledge base and like the tools and resources and everything. So yeah, that is it in a nutshell. But of course, I am here to answer any questions.
From the audience. Any question from the audience?
Yeah, and if anybody that is watching this ever has a question, you can always comment on the YouTube video that is posted. This is going straight to YouTube, so if you comment, chances are I'll get a notification and I should be able to respond to it, or I'll get the right person that knows the answer to respond to it. But yes, thank you guys. Thank you, Natalia, for coming out.
Guys, you guys were great. It was nice speaking to y'all.
Yeah.
No,
Awesome.
actually, it was pretty good. It was pretty good.
Thank you.
I'll try to make the other one.
Yeah, for sure. There's still two more sessions happening.